Every civilization that ever raised its eyes to the night sky asked the same question. What does this mean for me? The Babylonians answered with omens. The Egyptians with decans and divine clocks. The Greeks with a rational cosmos of causes. The Renaissance with a humanist sky of personality. And the modern age, the age of the machine, the census, and the algorithm, answered with prediction. Astrology, in its classical form, promised something extraordinary. A single sky, a single system, a single truth, readable by anyone who learned the rules. That promise is the grand narrative. And this school begins where grand narratives die. The French philosopher Jean-François Lyotard defined the postmodern condition as incredulity toward metanarratives, a suspicion of any story that claims to explain everything from one center. Science had its metanarrative of progress. Religion had its metanarrative of salvation. And astrology had its metanarrative of the cosmic order, that the heavens encode a fixed hierarchy of meaning, that the zodiac is a universal language written once and forever, that a chart is a verdict. We reject none of astrology's techniques. We reject its claim to be the only sky. The postmodern astrologer holds two truths at once. The chart works, and the chart is a story. These are not contradictions, they are the two faces of any meaningful system. A language is not false because it is a language. A map is not useless because it is not the territory. But a map that forgets it is a map becomes a prison. So this course is built on a stance. Local, situated, self-aware. Every delineation we perform will be performed by an observer, with a gender, a history, a class, a language. The observer is in the chart, whether the chart knows it or not. We call this the aperture, the finite window of meaning available at any moment, constrained by culture and language and the position of the seer. The work of the delineator is not to pretend the aperture is infinite. It is to widen it, relentlessly, ethically, with technique. Welcome to the Axiom School. We will dismantle the zodiac in order to rebuild it, with every tool of advanced technique in our hands, and every illusion of certainty behind us. Let us make the aperture precise, because it will return in every chapter. Imagine a lens suspended between the sky and the self. The sky offers an infinite field of possible meaning, every point, every degree, every configuration, an actual event in a real cosmos. The self offers an infinite field of possible experience. But between them sits the lens of culture, language, history, power, belief. The lens does not invent the sky, and it does not invent the self. It determines which configurations can be seen, which can be spoken, which can be believed. In 18th century Europe, the lens could not see Uranus, because the telescope had not yet opened that aperture. The planet existed, the meaning did not. In 21st century media, the lens is saturated with one particular astrology, the horoscope column, the sun sign app. And so the aperture has narrowed to a single zodiac sign per person, a single commodity per market. The astrology itself is not small. The aperture has been allowed to shrink. Widening the aperture is a technical operation. It means learning more languages of the sky, the lunar mansions of the Indian nakshatras, the decanic degrees of Egypt, the harmonic registers of the 9th and 7th divisions, the midpoint trees of cosmobiology, the collective grammar of the outer planets. Each language opens a new band of the spectrum. This is the first theorem of the school, the chronospectral theorem. Planetary time is not a line but a spectrum. Every technique, transit, progression, solar arc, harmonic, is a wavelength of the same deep cycle. The events of a life are not predicted by one wavelength but by their interference pattern. Where several wavelengths crest together, meaning crystallizes. Prediction, then, is not prophecy. It is the resolution of an interference pattern, the honest calculation of where the wavelengths crest, and the honest admission of where they cancel. The old astrology promised certainty and delivered anxiety. The new astrology delivers neither certainty nor anxiety, but structure. A grammar of timing, a map of thresholds, a language in which the client can think their own life. That is the contract of this school. We teach the full technical apparatus, transits, progressions, solar arcs, harmonics, midpoints, synastry, composite, the long cycles of the outer planets. And we teach it inside a critical frame that refuses the single sky. Technique without critique is a panopticon. Critique without technique is a podcast. The Axiom School trains the third thing, the disciplined, self-aware, historically literate delineator. Let us begin. The zodiac did not fall from the sky. It was built, by hand, in specific places, by specific peoples, for specific purposes, and then it was stolen, cleaned, and presented as universal. The first act of the postmodern astrologer is to restore the archive. Consider what the standard history omits. The zodiac's oldest strata are not Greek but Mesopotamian. The Babylonians compiled omen series in which the sky was a writing. The heavens were read the way a liver was read, as a field of divine signs. Their Apen tablets catalogued the stars of the path of the moon, and their observational records, the Venus tablet of Amisaduqa, preserved planetary motion across 2 decades with astonishing accuracy. This was not philosophy, it was statecraft, the sky as intelligence service. Egypt contributed the decans, 36 star groups rising successively through the night, used to mark the hours and the seasons, and later fused with the Greek zodiac into a new calendar of the soul. India contributed the nakshatras, the 27 lunar mansions, a system of remarkable subtlety in which the moon's daily journey is read as a continuous narrative, a system that survives today, fully alive, in Jyotish. The Islamic world, from the translators of Baghdad to the astrolabe makers of Al-Andalus, preserved, refined, and mathematically sharpened the entire apparatus while Europe slept through its own dark ages. The Maya built their own sky archives, the Dresden Codex among them, with eclipse tables so precise they still function. Now watch what the colonial archive does. When European scholars assembled the history of astrology in the 18th and 19th centuries, they framed it as a single line. Babylon to Greece to Rome to Renaissance Europe. A triumphal march of Western reason, with every other lineage demoted to superstition, folklore, or precursor. The nakshatras became a footnote. The decans became a curiosity. The Maya became a mystery. One lineage was universalized, the others were museumized. That is not history. That is power writing itself as nature. Decolonizing the zodiac means refusing the single line. It means reading the wheel as a contact zone. A place where many star knowledges met, traded, and transformed one another. The zodiac we use is a creole, a language born of encounter. And a creole is not less than a pure language, it is richer, because it remembers more worlds. The postmodern delineator reads the wheel as polyphonic. The Greek sign, the Egyptian decan, the Indic mansion, the Arabic lots, the African skylore of the diaspora, all present, all speaking at once. Now we turn the decolonial lens into a method. Intersectionality, the framework developed by Black feminist legal scholar Kimberlé Crenshaw, holds that systems of power do not operate singly but overlap. Gender, race, class, ability, sexuality, nation. A black woman is not a woman plus a black person. She occupies a specific position where those axes cross, a position that is not the sum of its parts. The postmodern astrologer asks, why should the chart be different? A chart is an intersection. The sun speaks one axis of identity, the moon another, the ascendant a third, the outer planets a fourth, the generation, the class, the epoch. Classical delineation tried to collapse this polyphony into a single verdict. You are a Leo. You are a Capricorn. You are destined. Intersectional delineation refuses the collapse. It asks instead, how do the axes of this chart cross? Where do they reinforce? Where do they contradict? Where do they create a position that no single factor predicts? Consider the Saturn return. In the classical frame, it is an individual event, the person's own maturation crisis. In the intersectional frame, it is also a social event. A Saturn return in 2028, in the United States, occurs inside a national Saturn return, the return of the country's own founding chart. inside a generational Pluto transit, inside a technological revolution. The individual threshold and the collective threshold crest together. The chronospectral theorem says, that is when meaning crystallizes. The intersectional delineator reads the person through the epoch, and the epoch through the person, without dissolving either. And there is a political dimension the honest astrologer cannot ignore. Astrology has been used to naturalize hierarchy. The fixed order of signs as the fixed order of society. The planetary temperaments as racial and gendered topologies. The horoscope of nations as proof of destiny. The colonial zodiac was a machine for making the contingent look eternal. To decolonize the zodiac is to take that machine apart, to show that every hierarchy it proved was a reading, not a fact, and that other readings were always available. The decolonial ephemeris, then, is not a different set of tables. It is a different posture, humility before the archive, respect for the erased, suspicion of the universal. It is the practice of asking, before every delineation, whose sky is this? Who is silenced by this reading? Who benefits from it? The answer changes the reading. It always changes the reading. That is not a weakness of astrology. That is astrology becoming critical theory, a discipline that does not merely describe the world, but interrogates the world's description of itself. Before technique, the archive. Every method we will use was forged in a specific historical crucible, and the crucible left its shape in the metal. We begin 4,000 years ago, with a bronze disc pulled from the soil of Nebra, Germany, in 1999. A circle of sky-studded bronze with the sun, the moon, and the Pleiades beaten into gold. The Nebra sky disk is the oldest known concrete depiction of the cosmos. It is not decoration. Its golden arcs measure the horizon, marking where the sun rises and sets across the year. A sky compass for an agricultural people who needed to know, precisely, when the season turned. Astrology begins here, in the dirt. As a calendar, a technology of survival, a way of making the year predictable. The Babylonians industrialized this knowledge. By the second millennium before the Common Era, their scribes were compiling systematic celestial diaries, night after night of planetary positions, recorded as data. From this archive of observations came the first predictive grammar of the sky, the omen literature, in which celestial events were correlated with political and natural events on Earth. When Amisaduka's scribes recorded the risings of Venus across 21 years, they were building the first longitudinal dataset in human history. The sky had become a database, and the astrologer its analyst. The Hellenistic synthesis transformed the database into a science of the individual. In the first centuries of the Common Era, Greek and Egyptian practitioners, Claudius Ptolemy, Vettius Valens, Dorotheus of Sidon, fused Babylonian observation with Aristotelian cosmology and Egyptian temple wisdom into something new. The horoscope, cast for the moment of birth, readable as a map of a single life. This was a revolutionary claim. The sky, which had spoken of kings and harvests, now spoke of persons. The individual had entered the cosmos. Then came the preservation. While Europe's institutions collapsed, the Islamic world carried the entire apparatus forward, translating Ptolemy, refining the mathematics, building the astrolabe into a precision instrument, and adding centuries of observational data from Baghdad and Cairo and Toledo. When the knowledge returned to Europe, it returned transformed, mathematical, standardized, printed. The printing press made the ephemeris a mass commodity, the Renaissance made the horoscope a portrait. Astrology was now biography, medicine, and market research all at once, and it had never been more powerful, or more in need of critique. But archives are not neutral. They are built by selection, and selection is power. The Hellenistic synthesis that became the tradition was one synthesis among several, assembled from texts that happened to survive, in libraries that happened to be preserved, by scholars who happened to be Greek-speaking men. We do not possess the full record of the ancient sky. We possess the record that the winners kept. Consider what the standard lineage erases. The Assyrian and Babylonian astrologers read the sky for the state. Their astrology was political science. The Egyptian priests read the decans for the rhythm of the sacred year. Their astrology was liturgy. The Indian astronomers built a mathematics of time. Their astrology was cosmology. The Islamic astrolabe makers built an instrument of navigation, prayer, and measurement. Their astrology was engineering. The African traditions of skylore, from the Dogon's Sirius knowledge to the star cycles of southern Africa's herders, were oral archives, precisely the kind of archive the written record tends to lose. None of these was a primitive version of the Greek horoscope. Each was a complete system, with its own questions, its own answers, its own sophistication. The anthropological lesson is deeper still. Every human society we know of has built a sky order, but the orders differ in what they consider important. The Babylonians read the sky as divine writing. The Chinese read it as imperial mandate. The Greeks as rational cause. The Maya as cyclic recurrence. The modern West as statistical correlation. These are not errors of the same question. They are different questions. Astrology is not one thing that some cultures got wrong. It is a family of meaning technologies, each answering the question, how does a people bind its time? The postmodern astrologer therefore treats the tradition as an open archive rather than a closed canon. We learn the classical techniques with full rigor, because they are exquisitely refined instruments, but we hold them as instruments, not as revelation. And we remain alert to the archive's silences, the women's sky knowledge transmitted orally and erased from print, the colonized starlores museumized as folklore, the countless charts cast and destroyed in the everyday practice of ordinary people, leaving only the famous, the literate, the archived. When we delineate, we are not merely applying technique. We are continuing a conversation 4 millennia old, and we are responsible for what we add to it, and what we refuse to let it forget. Now the instruments. The moving sky offers the astrologer 3 great clocks, and the master delineator reads all 3 together, because, as the chronospectral theorem insists, meaning crystallizes where the wavelengths crest together. The first clock is the transit, the actual, physical positions of the planets as they move through the sky today, mapped against the frozen positions of the natal chart. The transit is the weather of the psyche, the pressure system moving across the terrain of the birth chart, activating this house, that angle, this conjunction, that opposition. Transit technique is a discipline of thresholds. The experienced delineator does not read every aspect with equal weight, she reads the architecture. The slow planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and beyond, structure the years. The fast planets, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, color the weeks and days. Jupiter's return every 12 years opens the doors of expansion. Saturn's return every 29 years closes the accounts of a life stage. The transits of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto mark the generational tectonics underneath. The beginner reads transits as events. The master reads them as phases. The ingress into a sign, the station, the retrograde dance, the exact hit, the separation. Each phase a different chapter of the same story. The second clock is the progression, and here the technique becomes genuinely subtle. The secondary progression maps 1 day of life onto 1 year of the sky. The planets of the natal chart advance at the rate of a day per year, so that the progressed sun moves about 1 degree per year, the progressed moon about 1 degree per month, the progressed angles 1 degree per year. Progressions are not the weather, they are the climate. They describe the inner evolution of the psyche, the slow unfolding of the self's own timetable, independent of the outer sky. The classic progressed milestone is the progressed moon's 29-year journey through the houses, a biography of need, in 12 chapters. The progressed sun's conjunction with the natal sun, every 30 years, is a second birth. But the true power of progressions is not in any single hit. It is in their relationship to the transits, the third clock, and to the solar arc, which we will take up in the next lecture. Hold both clocks in mind, the outer weather and the inner climate, the event and the evolution. The delineator who reads only one is reading half the sentence. The third clock is the solar arc, the simplest and most powerful timing device in the advanced toolkit. The solar arc advances every point of the chart by exactly the same amount as the progressed sun moves in a given year, roughly 1 degree per year. Thus the entire chart, every planet, every angle, every sensitive point, moves forward in unison, like a constellation rotating on a wheel. When a solar arc point forms an exact aspect to a natal point, we have a date. The method is astonishingly simple. Count the arc, find the hit, date the event. Its power lies in its rigor, and in its union with the other clocks. For the solar arc is the bridge between progression and transit. Progressions describe the inner evolution. Transits describe the outer activation. The solar arc describes the structural maturation, the chart's own design reaching its appointed moments. The master's method, which we will call the 3-clock method, is to triangulate. When a solar arc aspect is maturing, and a progressed aspect is developing, and a slow transit is exact, the 3 clocks crest together, meaning crystallizes. A threshold is reached. The event, inner or outer, becomes possible, probable, and finally actual. Now the discipline of orbs. The postmodern delineator is honest about uncertainty. An orb is not a fence but a gradient. For the fast and slow clocks we use graduated orbs. A degree or 2 for the moon, 3 for the sun and personal planets, 5 to 8 for the social planets, and up to 10 for the outer planets, whose long years make a tighter orb meaningless. But the gradient has a shape. The effect intensifies as the aspect approaches exactness, peaks at the station and the exact hit, and releases in the separation. The chart does not click, it breathes. The master learns the breathing. And the retrograde, the most misunderstood of all phenomena. A planet's retrograde is not a reversal of fate, it is a change of phase. In the geocentric sky, the apparent backward motion marks the planet's most intense engagement with Earth. The station, where the planet stands still for days, is the moment of maximum charge. The transiting retrogrades of the outer planets create the great windows of collective experience. Saturn's retrograde renegotiates contracts. Uranus's retrograde reopens revolutions. Neptune's retrograde dissolves and redissolves belief. The postmodern delineator reads the retrograde as the sky's way of saying, revise. The 3-clock method, the graduated orb, the phase of the retrograde, these are the discipline of the first clock. In the next lecture, we extend the toolkit into harmonics, midpoints, and the dial. We have 3 clocks, now we multiply the lenses. The harmonic chart is one of the most powerful, and most underused, instruments in the advanced repertoire. The idea is simple and radical. Instead of reading the natal wheel as a circle of 360 degrees, we divide it into a different number of equal segments and remap the planets into the new wheel. The second harmonic divides the circle in 2, the opposition axis, the either-or. The fourth harmonic divides it into 4, the square, the crisis of structure. The fifth opens the quintile family, the geometry of talent and creative gift. The seventh opens the septile family, the sacred, the fated, the uncanny. The ninth opens the novel, the devotional, the ideal, the inspired. Each harmonic is a tonal register of the same chart. The classical astrologer read 1 octave. The harmonic astrologer reads the whole chord. A natal square that is harsh in the 4th harmonic may reveal, in the 9th, a vocation, in the 5th, an art. The harmonic chart does not contradict the natal chart. It transposes it into a key in which different patterns become audible. This is the spectral reading the chronospectral theorem demands. The same configuration, examined at different wavelengths, yields different but consonant meanings. The practical method. To construct the 5th harmonic, multiply every planet's longitude by 5, modulo 360, and redraw the wheel. The resulting chart shows not where the planets are but how their positions resonate at that frequency. Aspects that are hidden in the natal wheel, too wide, too oblique, snap into exactness in a harmonic. The master harmonic IST builds a ladder. The natal wheel for structure, the 4th for crisis, the 5th for gift, the 7th for fate, the 9th for faith. The same life, heard in 5 registers. And the harmonic method has a diagnostic precision the classical orb can never match. In a harmonic chart, the aspects are exact. The harmonic division either produces a conjunction or it does not. There is no fudging, no fuzzy orb. The chart answers in yes and no. This is why harmonics are the preferred instrument of the astrological researchers and the statistical delineators. They turn interpretation into measurement. The postmodern astrologer treasures this, and remembers the aperture. Measurement is not meaning. The harmonic tells us what is exact. It does not tell us what is true. The truth is the conversation between the exact and the lived. The second great lens of this lecture is the midpoint. The point exactly halfway between two planets. The point where their energies meet and merge. The midpoint is the quiet genius of the chart. It is not a planet, not an aspect, but a place, and in that place, two principles are in permanent dialogue. The sun-moon midpoint is the point of the self's integration, the person's center of gravity. The ascendant midheaven midpoint is the point of public identity. The Venus-Mars midpoint is the point of desire. Midpoints are read by planetary contact. When a third planet transits or aspects a midpoint, the dialogue between the two midpoint planets becomes activated, audible, eventful. The full art of midpoints is the midpoint tree, the lattice of all pairwise midpoints of the chart. Thousands of sensitive points, each a potential activation. This is overwhelming until disciplined by the dial. The dial is the instrument of cosmobiology, a circle divided into 90 degrees, in which all aspects of the same family are folded together. The opposition falls on the same dial point as the conjunction, the square on the same as the trine's complement. The dial is a compression lens. It shows the pattern of the chart in a single image, the way a spectrograph shows a star's composition in a single line. On the dial, the midpoint tree becomes readable. The master scans for the clusters, the points where many midpoints and many planets pile onto the same dial degree. These clusters are the load-bearing structures of the life. The places where the chart concentrates its meaning, where events will repeatedly, insistently occur. The unclustered dial is a quiet life. The clustered dial is a destiny. Not because fate dictates it, but because the chart's own geometry keeps returning to the same intersections. The postmodern delineator uses the dial with the same discipline as the harmonic: exactness of measurement, honesty of interpretation. The dial tells us where the chart concentrates. It does not tell us what the concentration means. That is the work of the aperture, the culture, the lived life. Harmonics for the register, midpoints for the load-bearing points, the dial for the pattern. Add these to the three clocks, and the delineator now commands the full spectrum. Transits for weather, progressions for climate, solar arcs for structure, harmonics for register, midpoints for focus. This is the advanced toolkit. In the next lecture, we turn from the single chart to the between space of two charts, synastry and the composite. The single chart is a portrait, the relationship is a duet. Synastry, the comparison of two charts, is not the addition of two verdicts. It is the reading of a between space, the field that opens where two skies meet. The classical synastry reads the aspects between the charts. My Venus on your moon, your Saturn on my sun, my Mars on your ascendant. Each inter-aspect is a channel of contact, a place where one person's planet reaches into the other person's chart and touches something living. The moon of one, meeting the Venus of the other, is a channel of tenderness. The Saturn of one, meeting the sun of the other, is a channel of discipline, and, unexamined, a channel of constraint. The master of synastry reads the channels as a system, not as a list. The question is not whether a channel is good or bad, the question is what the system amplifies and what it silences. Two charts with brilliant Venus-Mars contact and no moon contact will ignite and starve. Two charts with heavy Saturn-Saturn contact and soft moon-Venus contact will endure and chill. The relational field has a structure, and the structure has an ethic. No channel is a verdict. A square between my Saturn and your moon is not a sentence of suffering. It is a specific kind of work, a specific discipline of care, that the relationship will ask of both people. And here the postmodern lens is indispensable, because relationship reading is where the astrologer's biases do the most damage. The classical synastry is saturated with unexamined ideology, the gendered planets, the fixed roles, the possessive readings of the angles. The intersectional delineator asks instead, what does this field ask of each person's freedom? Where does it expand the aperture of either chart, and where does it contract it? A relationship is not a destiny, it is a shared aperture, a lens two people hold together, through which each sees more, or less, of their own sky. The technique of synastry, in practice, is a discipline of attention. Begin with the angular contacts, the points of the other chart that fall on your ascendant-descendant and midheaven-imam Cheli axes. These are the magnetic connections, the ones that feel fated. Then the luminary contacts, the moon and sun of each chart meeting the planets of the other. These are the channels of daily life, of nourishment and recognition. Then the slow planets, the generational contacts that say less about the individuals and more about the epoch the relationship inherits. The aspect grid, the full matrix of interaspects, is the relational heat map. Scan it for the clusters, the overloaded channels, and the silences. The silences matter as much as the contacts. The synastry reads the field, the composite chart reads the third entity. The composite is constructed by taking the midpoint of each pair of planets. The sun of chart A and the sun of chart B produce the composite sun. The moon of A and the moon of B produce the composite moon, and casting an entirely new chart for the relationship itself. This is the great conceptual leap. The relationship is not a sum of two people. It is a being in its own right, with its own sun, its own moon, its own ascendant, its own biography. The composite chart is the most powerful instrument in relational astrology, and the most dangerous, because it tempts the astrologer to speak of the relationship as if it had a will of its own. The postmodern delineator holds the paradox. The composite is a fiction, and a necessary one. It is a language for the between space, a way of giving the third entity a grammar. The composite sun shows what the relationship is for, its purpose, its flame. The composite moon shows how the relationship feeds, its daily nourishment, its emotional climate. The composite ascendant shows how the relationship appears to the world, its face, its handshake. And the composite angles show the relationship's vocation in the world. The master's method reads the composite through the same three clocks as the individual chart. The composite has transits. The outer planets moving across the composite wheel mark the relationship's eras. The composite has progressions, the slow maturation of the third entity. The composite has solar arcs, the dated thresholds of the relationship's design. A relationship that forms when Saturn transits the composite sun will be a Saturnian bond. One that forms under Jupiter will be a Jupiterian venture. One that forms under Neptune will be a Neptunian dream. And the dream, unexamined, becomes the disillusion. The composite does not predict the relationship. It gives the relationship a sky of its own, so that the people in it can think their shared time. And the ethics of the relational sky. The composite and the synastry are instruments of understanding, not instruments of judgment. No chart, individual, synastral, or composite, can tell a person whom to love, or when to leave. What the relational sky can do is far more valuable. It can name the work. It can say, here is the channel of tenderness, and here is the channel of discipline, here is the third entity's purpose, and here is its shadow. The rest is freedom, the freedom of two apertures choosing to widen together. That is the postmodern covenant of the relational sky. Technique without verdict, structure without sentence. We now ascend from the individual to the generation. The outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, are not personal planets. They are the structural conditions of an epoch, the tectonic plates of the collective psyche. They move so slowly that an entire generation is born under the same sign of each, and so they do not describe the person. They describe the world the person inherits. The postmodern astrologer calls this planetary sociology, the reading of the sky as the grammar of a generation's conditions, not the biography of its members. Begin with Pluto. Pluto spends roughly 12 to 31 years in a sign. Its orbit is the most eccentric of the classical planets, and its durations vary wildly. Pluto in Aquarius, entered in 2024, will run until 2044. A 2-decade restructuring of power itself. Pluto is the planet of power, death, transformation, the unconscious, the deep current that dismantles what no longer serves the species. In Aquarius, the sign of the collective, the network, the technology, the rebellion, Pluto's work is the transformation of the collective itself, the dismantling of centralized power by distributed networks, the death and rebirth of institutions, the transformation of technology from tool to master, the profound rearrangement of who holds power and how. This is not a prediction of events. It is a description of the tectonic condition under which every event of the next 2 decades will occur. Uranus in Gemini, entered in 2025, runs to 2033. An 8-year revolution in communication, information, and thought itself. Uranus is the planet of rupture, invention, revolution, the lightning of the new. In Gemini, the sign of the word, the message, the network, the mind, Uranus's work is the revolution of information, the fragmentation and recombination of media, the transformation of language by machine, the acceleration of thought beyond the human scale, the breaking of every information monopoly. The 2020s, digital convulsions are not random, they are Uranus in Gemini's weather, and the delineator who reads this sky understands that the convulsion is structural, not incidental. And Neptune in Aries, entered in 2025, running to 2039. A 14-year dissolution and reignition of belief. Neptune is the planet of dream, illusion, faith, the collective unconscious, the sea. In Aries, the sign of the self, the will, the beginning, Neptune's work is the dissolution of the old self and the dreaming of a new one. The collapse of inherited identities, the fog of misinformation, the mystical and the fraudulent rising together, the reignition of primordial will beneath the mist. Every epoch of Neptune in Aries in history, and it is a rare transit, occurring only every century and a half, has been a threshold between worlds. We are at one now. Beneath the 3 outers, the architect of generational time is Saturn, the boundary maker, the structure builder, the lord of time itself. Saturn's 29-year cycle is the great rhythm of institutional life. The Saturn return of a person, a nation, or a corporation marks the closing of an era and the audit of its accounts. Every generation, Saturn in Aries, approximately every 29 years, begins a new cycle of structure. What the society builds, what it enforces, what it becomes. The Saturn cycles of the modern era are the skeleton of the historical record, the 1996 Saturn in Aries generation, the 2026 ingress, the 2056. Each marks the birth of a new social architecture, born of the previous cycle's collapse. The long architecture is built from the conjunctions of the outer planets, the great meetings that occur once in a lifetime, once in a century, once in a millennium. The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the great mutation, moves from element to element every 2 centuries, marking the great eras of civilization, the fire era of empire and faith, the earth era of property and state, the air era of trade and idea, the water era of feeling and dissolution. The Uranus-Neptune conjunction occurs every century and a half, marking the revolutionary dreaming epochs of modernity. 1821. The Age of Romantic Revolution. 1993. The Digital Dream. 2146. The next. We will not live to see it, but we are its seed. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction, rarer still, every 36 years, marks the great meetings of structure and dream. 1989. The Fall of Walls. 2026. The New Architecture of Belief. And the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, every 33 years, marks the great audits of power. 1947, 1982, 2020. The years when the structure of power is weighed and found wanting, when the collective is forced to confront its own foundations. The postmodern astrologer reads these great conjunctions not as omens but as conditions. They describe the architecture of the possible, what can be built, what will be destroyed, what the epoch is for. The generation born under Pluto in Aquarius does not share a fate. It shares a condition, and a responsibility. The work of the epoch is theirs to do. This is the deepest lesson of the generational engine. The outer planets do not predict the news, they frame the era. The astrologer of society reads the sky as a description of collective conditions, and then reads the conditions as the aperture of the epoch. The generation is not trapped by its sky, it is summoned by it. The sky of 2026 to 2040 is a sky of threshold. Old structures dissolving, new structures dreaming. Power being redistributed, belief being refounded. Not a destiny, a summons. Now we practice what the whole course has been building toward. A rigorous forecasting methodology for the years 2026 to 2040. The method is the 3-clock method, scaled to the collective. Transits for the weather of the epoch, progressions and solar arcs for the maturation of its institutions, and the long conjunctions for the architecture of the era. We do not predict events, we delineate conditions, the structure of what becomes possible, year by year, threshold by threshold. This is forecasting as the advanced astrologer practices it. Honest about uncertainty, precise about structure. The threshold year is 2026, the year the course is being delivered, and its centerpiece is the great conjunction of Saturn and Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries, exact on the 20th of February, 2026. This is a rare and potent meeting, the structure builder and the dream maker, together at the first degree of the zodiac, the point of beginning itself. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction is the signature of an era's architecture of belief. 1917. The Age of Utopian Revolution. 1989. The Collapse of the Wall. 2026. The New Foundation. At 0 Aries, the meeting is doubled. It is not merely a conjunction of planets. It is a conjunction at the beginning of the wheel. A cosmic statement of commencement. The years 2026 through 2029 will be the building of a new social architecture, part dream, part structure, part illusion, part law, and the delineator's task is to read the mixture honestly. The same year, Saturn and Neptune both ingress Aries. Pluto continues through Aquarius, Uranus through Gemini, Neptune through Aries. 5 of the 10 planets are in fire and air, the initiating, the collective, the communicative elements. This is the sky of a world starting something. 2026 is not a year of conclusion. It is a year of inception, the first year of a new long cycle whose shape we have just delineated. The astrologer of society reads the ingress chart of the year as the year's birth chart, the first moments of the new epoch, and reads its transits as the epoch's weather. The methodology is threefold. First, read the long architecture, the outer planet positions and their mutual aspects for the entire period. This gives the frame. Second, read the middle rhythm, the Jupiter-Saturn cycle and the Saturn cycle, the 19-year and 29-year meters that structure institutional life. This gives the beat. Third, read the short weather, the annual ingresses, the eclipses, the stations of the outer planets. This gives the texture. The master forecast does not guess, it layers. And where the layers crest together, that is where the threshold crystallizes. We will now walk the years. Walk the years with us. 2026. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 Aries, the inception of the new architecture. The year's work is foundation, institutions and beliefs being refounded at the beginning degree, and the beginning is always contested, always uncertain. 2027. The architecture begins to take shape. Saturn moves through its new cycle, testing what was built. The first audits of the new structure arrive. 2028. The United States experiences its national Saturn return, the return of the country's own founding chart. A once-in-a-generation audit of the republic's structure. The collective is asked what it has become, and what it will be. The individual Saturn returns of 2028 coincide with this national audit. Millions of people, individually and collectively, are asked the same question at the same time. 2029 through 2031. The Great Square. Neptune and Aries squaring the nodes. Saturn testing the dream, the first major crisis of the new architecture. The square is the crisis of structure, the dream and the law at cross purposes, the foundation tested by the ideal. The delineator reads these years as the epic's adolescence, brilliant, contradictory, dangerous, formative. 2032. Uranus enters Cancer. The first Uranus ingress into a new element since 2018. The revolution arriving in the sign of home, family, homeland, nourishment. The years 2032 through 2039 will be the refounding of the domestic world, housing, care, roots, belonging, the collective's private life transformed by rupture. 2036 through 2037. The Fire Grand Trine. A rare and beautiful configuration of the outer planets in the fire signs. The sky's gift of ignition. The epic's creative breakthrough, the world's second wind. The Fire Grand Trine is the reward of the threshold years. The architecture, tested and matured, now burns with purpose. 2038. Neptune enters Taurus. The dissolution arriving in the sign of value, money, the earth. The great revaluation of everything. Resources, wealth, the body, the land. The years 2038 to 2052 will be the epic of value itself. What the world is worth, what we will pay, what we will not sell. And 2040. The threshold of the course's horizon. Jupiter and Saturn in conjunction in the fire sign of Aries. The great mutation returning to fire after 2 centuries of air. The years after 2040 will be the beginning of the fire era. The era of will, of ignition, of the new mythology. We do not predict what the fire era will be. We delineate its condition. The world the 2026 generation was born to build. The forecast is not a prophecy. It is a map of thresholds, honestly drawn, with the uncertainty marked, and the freedom left wide open. That is the methodology of the advanced astrologer of society. The individual chart is a biography, the collective chart is a sociology. The astrology of society reads the same sky at a different scale, not the person but the public, not the life but the era. The postmodern astrologer of society asks, what is the collective dreaming, fearing, building, dissolving? And the answer is in the sky, not as omens, but as structural descriptions of the collective psyche. The first instrument of social astrology is the generation itself. The cohort born under a given outer planet configuration is the cohort that will carry that configuration's work through life. The Pluto in Scorpio generation, born 1983 to 1995, is the generation of transformation and exposure, the investigators of the hidden. The Pluto in Sagittarius generation, 1995 to 2008, is the generation of belief and its crisis, the truth seekers and the truth questioners. The Pluto in Capricorn generation, 2008 to 2024, is the generation of the collapse of institutions, born into the audit of power, the ones who will rebuild the state or bury it. And the Pluto in Aquarius generation, 2024 to 2044, is the generation of the collective itself, born into the transformation of power, the network native inheritors of the distributed world. The social astrologer reads the generation as the epic's workforce, the people who will do the era's work, whether they choose it or not. The second instrument is the ingress, the chart of the moment a planet enters a sign, the birth chart of an era. The ingress of Saturn into Aries in 2026 is the birth of a new social architecture. The ingress of Uranus into Cancer in 2032 is the birth of a new domestic world. The ingress of Neptune into Taurus in 2038 is the birth of a new economy of value. Each ingress is a threshold. The sky commits to a condition for years, and the social astrologer reads that condition as the aperture of the era. What can be built, what will be destroyed, what the public will be able to imagine. The third instrument is the eclipse, the twice-yearly meetings of sun and moon at the nodes, the sky's punctuation marks. Eclipses fall on the collective's sensitive points, activating the social chart's angles and luminaries. A solar eclipse on the national ascendant is a national threshold. An eclipse series, the Saros family, is a generations-long conversation between the sky and a people. The social astrologer tracks the eclipse families like a historian tracks dynasties. They are the recurring appointments between the collective and its sky. And the fourth instrument is the mundane chart. The chart cast for the moment of a state's founding, a constitution's signing, a corporation's incorporation, the horoscope of an institution, read with the full 3-clock method. The United States has a natal chart, its sun, its Saturn, its angles. Every national event is a transit to that chart. The postmodern astrologer of society reads institutions as persons with charts, fates, and responsibilities, and reads the collective as a psyche with dreams, shadows, and thresholds. This is the social sky. Astrology at the scale of the public. And now the ethical axis of the social sky, the choice that defines modern practice. The commons or the panopticon. The panopticon is the surveillance machine, the tower at the center from which all is seen. The astrological panopticon is the astrology of control, the horoscope as a dossier, the prediction as a verdict, the chart as a way of fixing a person or a people in place. The colonial zodiac was a panopticon, the sky used to naturalize hierarchy, to prove destiny, to keep the contingent eternal. The commercial horoscope industry is a panopticon of a subtler kind, the sun sign app that knows your birth data and sells your personality, the prediction market that monetizes your fear. The panopticon astrologer asks, "What can I see?" The postmodern astrologer asks, "Who benefits from this seeing?" The commons is the shared field, the sky as common ground, the archive as common property, the delineation as common knowledge. The commons astrologer asks, "How does this reading belong to everyone?" The astrological commons is ancient. The sky was the first public square, the first shared calendar, the first common reference point of every people. The postmodern restoration of the commons means returning astrology to the public. Open archives, shared charts, collective delineation. The sky is a language anyone may speak, and everyone's right to their own reading. The commons astrologer is not the authority. The commons astrologer is the keeper of the common sky, the one who widens the aperture for everyone. The choice is not merely ethical, it is technical. The panopticon astrology is thin. It must reduce the chart to a verdict to be useful, and a verdict is a small thing. The commons astrology is rich. It can hold the full polyphony of the chart, the intersectional complexity, the honest uncertainty, because it does not need to sell certainty. The panopticon needs the single sky. The commons can afford the many. This is why the postmodern astrologer of society is by vocation a commons keeper. The discipline's richest readings are only possible where the sky is free. In practice, the commons test is simple. For any astrological product, service, or reading, does this widen the client's aperture, increase their agency, their self-knowledge, their freedom to think their own life? Or does it narrow it, fix them in a verdict, sell them a fate, harvest their data? The first is commons, the second is panopticon. There is no neutral astrology. Every reading either opens or closes. The advanced astrologer of society therefore practices with the commons test always in hand, and teaches the client the sky, so that the client becomes the delineator of their own life. That is the social sky at its best. Not a tower watching the many, but a shared field, under a sky everyone may read. The last instrument is the psyche itself. The deepest dialogue in the history of astrology is with psychology, and its greatest figure is Carl Gustav Jung, who treated the horoscope not as a prediction machine but as a map of the psyche, an image of the self's structure, its potentials, its shadows. For Jung, the planetary glyphs or archetypes, the primordial images of the collective unconscious, the inherited patterns of the human psyche. Saturn is not a planet that makes you depressed. Saturn is the archetype of the boundary, the father, the law, the old king. And every person must meet that archetype within themselves. Mars is the archetype of the will and the warrior. Venus of love and value. The moon of the mother and the feeling body. The sun of the self and its radiance. The chart, read psychologically, is the archetypal architecture of a soul. The first psychological instrument is the persona and the shadow. The persona is the mask the self shows the world, in the chart, the ascendant and its ruler, the sun's expression, the public angles. The shadow is everything the self cannot admit, the repressed, the denied, the unclaimed, and it is written in the chart with terrible precision. The unexpected planet, the buried 12th house content, the difficult contacts to the luminaries. The shadow is not evil, it is simply unconscious. The astrologer who reads only the persona reads the portrait. The astrologer who reads the shadow reads the life. Because everything the persona denies, the shadow lives anyway. The shadow work of astrology is the discipline of naming what the client cannot yet name, gently, precisely, with the chart as the witness. The second instrument is the anima and the animus, the contrasexual soul image, the inner feminine of a man, the inner masculine of a woman. In the chart, classically the moon and Venus for the man, the sun and Mars for the woman. The postmodern astrologer immediately widens this. The anima animus is not a gender script but a principle of wholeness, the encounter with the other within, the integration of what the culture has split. The chart's Moon-Mars, Sun-Venus, and Venus-Mars relationships describe the self's inner dialogue between the receptive and the initiating, the feeling and the will. The individuation, Jung's term for the lifelong work of becoming whole, is the astrological process par excellence. The slow integration of every planetary principle into a single, self-aware psyche. This is the Saturnian labor, the work of the boundary maker, the structure builder, the one who finishes what they begin. The third psychological instrument is the alchemical stages, the ancient sequence of transformation that Jung recognized as a map of individuation itself. The first stage is the negretto, the blackening, the encounter with the shadow, the breakdown, the dark night. In the chart, the Saturn and Pluto contacts, the 12th house, the difficult outer planet transits. The negretto is not the enemy, it is the beginning. The second is the albedo, the whitening, the purification, the clarification, the first light after the dark, the Jupiter and Venus contacts, the 9th and 10th houses, the transits of the benefics. The third is the citronitas, the yellowing, the dawn of the solar self, the integration of the will, the sun's maturation, the Leo and 5th house activation. And the fourth is the rubedo, the reddening, the completion, the full ignition, the philosopher's stone, the integration of the whole psyche, the finished work. The alchemical chart is the map of the soul's opus, the work the self is here to do, stage by stage, threshold by threshold. And now the ethics, because astrology of the psyche is medicine adjacent, and the postmodern astrologer must draw the boundary with absolute clarity. Astrology accompanies, it does not diagnose. The chart can describe the structure of a psyche, it cannot diagnose a disorder. The astrologer is not a clinician. The delineation is not a prescription. The client's suffering is not a Saturn transit to be waved away. The ethical protocol is fixed. Astrology is a language of meaning, not a substitute for treatment. When the chart suggests pain, the heavy Saturn-Pluto contacts, the afflicted moon, the 12th house depth, the astrologer's duty is not to prophesy but to accompany, to name the structure, to widen the aperture, and to refer, to the clinician, the healer, the community. The astrologer who diagnoses is practicing without a license. The astrologer who refers is practicing with wisdom. And the shadow work of the astrologer themselves, every delineator projects. The astrology of the psyche requires the astrologer's own analysis, the ongoing encounter with their own chart, their own shadow, their own unexamined bias. The postmodern school insists, the observer is in the chart. The astrologer who has not done their own negretto will read their own shadow into every client's sky. The discipline of the psychological astrologer is therefore double: mastery of the instrument, and mastery of the self. The chart is a mirror that reflects both. This is the deepest practice of the school, and the most demanding: to read the psyche's sky with a psyche that has learned to read itself. We have traveled the full spectrum, from the death of grand narratives to the birth of the collective sky. From the decolonial archive to the alchemical stages. From the 3 clocks to the midpoint tree. From the single chart to the social field. Now we assemble the instrument. The postmodern astrologer practices with the full technical apparatus and the full critical frame, and the two are one discipline. Technique without critique is a panopticon. Critique without technique is a podcast. The Axiom School trains the third thing. Let us now state the Axiom practice protocol, the 10 steps of the advanced delineator. First, establish the aperture. Before any reading, name the frame. Whose sky is this? Who is the observer? What can this reading see and what does it silence? The aperture is not an obstacle to precision, it is the condition of precision. A reading that knows its frame is more honest than one that pretends to none. Second, assemble the archive. Gather the data, birth time, place, date, rectified if necessary, and the context, the history, the culture, the epoch. The chart is read inside the archive, never above it. Third, cast the chart. The natal wheel, the angles, the houses, the rulers, the structure of the self. Fourth, sound the registers. Run the harmonics, the 4th for crisis, the 5th for gift, the 7th for fate, the 9th for faith, and hear the chart in all its keys. Fifth, find the load-bearing points. Build the midpoint tree, scan the dial, mark the clusters, the places where the chart concentrates its meaning. Sixth, read the 3 clocks. Transits for the weather, progressions for the climate, solar arcs for the structure, and where they crest together, the threshold. Seventh, widen to the relational field. If the question is between, read the synastry and the composite, the channels and the third entity, with technique and without verdict. Eighth, ascend to the social sky. Place the person in the generation, the epoch, the collective conditions, the Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn architecture the client inherited. The individual is never alone in the sky. Ninth, descend to the psyche. Read the archetypes, the persona and the shadow, the alchemical stage, with the ethics of accompaniment. Astrology accompanies, it does not diagnose. And 10th, return the sky. Give the reading to the client, the language, the map, the thresholds, so that they become the delineator of their own life. The reading is complete when the client owns it. And so we end where we began, with the aperture. The old astrology promised a single sky, a single system, a single truth, and the promise was always a reduction, a narrowing, a tower. The postmodern astrology of the Axiom School promises the opposite: many skies, many systems, many truths, and the discipline to navigate them with rigor and with honesty. The aperture is not a limitation to be lamented, it is the human condition to be honored. Every reading is a window, not the whole view. The master delineator does not pretend otherwise. The chronospectral theorem returns one last time. Planetary time is a spectrum, and the art of delineation is the resolution of the interference pattern, the honest calculation of where the wavelengths crest, and the honest admission of where they cancel. The 3 clocks, the harmonics, the midpoints, the relational field, the social sky, the psyche. These are not separate systems but wavelengths of the same deep cycle, the same sky, the same human story. Where they crest together, meaning crystallizes. The delineator's craft is to see the crests, and to leave the meaning to the life. The Axiom School's final lesson is the commons test, held to the end. Does this astrology widen or narrow? Does it open apertures or close them? The advanced astrologer practices always on the side of the commons, the shared sky, the shared archive, the shared self-knowledge, and refuses the panopticon in all its forms, the verdict, the dossier, the commodified fate. The sky belongs to everyone. The delineator is its steward, not its owner. Student of the sky, the course is complete. You have dismantled the zodiac and rebuilt it, with the decolonial archive restored, the 3 clocks in hand, the harmonics and midpoints ringing, the social sky and the psyche's depth mapped, and the ethics of the commons at your center. The instruments are yours now. The aperture is yours. The sky, the many skies, are yours to read, yours to widen, yours to share. Go and delineate, with rigor, with humility, with freedom. Finis coronat opus. The end crowns the work. This has been the Axiom School. Thank you for studying with us, and may your readings always widen.